from the divine center. And I also put in brackets, remain in the state of fulfillment. Remain in the state of fulfillment. I posted on my Instagram today, I'll link in the description to it. I'm not sure if you've seen it. I said, I let the world be to appear as I am. True self-acceptance. The great secret of life, the truth that sets you free, is to dwell in, with, and from the divine center within, that I am, as I and the Father are one. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Tantric cosmology. In Tantric cosmology, the whole universe is perceived as being created, penetrated, and sustained by two fundamental aspects, which are permanently in a perfect, indestructible union. These universal aspects are called Shiva and Shakti. Shiva is the observer and Shakti the observation. From a metaphysical point of view, the divine couple, Shiva-Shakti, corresponds to two essential aspects of the One. Shiva can be looked at as pure being in its stillness. Shakti is pure becoming in flow and creativity, as well as the endless opening to possibility. So, we discussed this on the journey to actualizing our vision, to remain unconditional to, and thus unconditioned by appearances. Being eternally beyond conformity, you can witness the perfect and pleasing divine dance as appearances rearrange to appear as heaven on earth in increasing frequency on a continuous basis as far as the senses perceive. Be as I am. We referred to this in Sunday's video. I'll link in the description to it. Also inspired by Romans 12:2, in which it states, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will." So we experience this while we're in a state of flow state, which is what I would like to discuss today. Practically experiencing what we're discussing by remaining in your flow, where, again, you find it easier to remain unconditional to, and thus do not allow the individual to be conditioned by appearances, forming an identity around appearances in which conditions are formed, in which the individual may say, if this condition appears, then I am blissful. Or if this condition does not appear, then I am not blissful. I am blissful. True self-acceptance, acknowledging that I am blissful. Satchit Ananda. As a matter of fact, that's one of the neurotransmitters that is released while you're in flow. Anandamide, which was named after, actually, the Sanskrit word Ananda, which means bliss. There are a number of neurotransmitters that are released in a perfect harmony and synchronicity while you're in flow, which is one of the reasons why I encourage remaining in your flow. And remaining in your flow in relation to your initiatives on the journey to actualizing your vision. This can be applied to any form of creative expression: visual arts, music, entrepreneurship, literature, dance, theater and performing arts, sports, film, culinary arts, to name a few. Remaining in your flow. We'll talk about how to do this in a moment. So while we are in our flow, we're able to purely observe the appearances, and we could say allow them to rearrange to appear as a form of creative expression, whatever you set the intention to. So for example, in dance, being in flow is perfect synchronicity with another individual, feeling one with the experience, spiritual integration, physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual harmony. It is where this sense of the individual seems to rest assured, knowing that I am, fundamental reality in which all appears to be in harmony. Like stated in Mark 14:36, nevertheless, not what I will, but what thou wilt. I let the world be to appear as I am. So, I let the world be to appear as I am in relation to appearances, in relation to my vision, in relation to the different aspects on the journey to actualizing my vision, whatever they may be. Skill cultivation, creative expression in, let's say, for example, in entrepreneurship. I look at flow-based conversations as a form of creative expression, relating ideally to appearances from the premise of truth, knowing that I am bliss. Let's talk about what occurs within while you're in flow, and then we'll talk about how to step into the flow and remain in the flow, and the benefits as a result of doing so. So neurotransmitters, for example, dopamine is released while you're in flow, which increases attention, information flow, and pattern recognition. The individual might be confused. What should I do? What should I not do? Should I think this? Should I not think that? What are the moves to make in relation to this creative expression? Well, it happens automatically, and ideally automatically, actually, while you're in flow. Pattern recognition is experienced. For example, if you're playing a musical instrument, you seem to flow with the musical instrument. I like how one of my clients had mentioned it, who plays the guitar, said that the guitar determines how it desires to be played. That's the kind of relationship the individual has with the musical instrument. They're both experienced as one. You could say Shiva Shakti. Norepinephrine also is released, which triggers a glucose response, and we experience having more energy, increased arousal, attention, neural efficiency, and emotional regulation. And this also can be experienced as a high. So an individual becomes deeply engaged in the initiative. They enjoy the process. For example, I love sales, I love communication, and I enjoy these aspects in my entrepreneurial journey. So in the earlier stages, I realized that there was a pattern. Every time I was in a flow state, I genuinely enjoyed these experiences. When I was not in a flow state, it appeared as I would imagine conflict. As we discussed in Sunday's video, which again I'll link to in the description, I consider thoughts, emotions, and behaviors and the outer aspects of life as appearances. So what appears through the five senses and the mental phenomena in relation to the five senses are appearances. And so the appearances would appear as imagining people in conflict in the various communities that I was involved with, friendships, relationships, business interactions, etc. Yet while I was in flow, I did not witness these imaginal conflicts in my mind's eye. Thus, I was not generating these experiences. Rather, what I was witnessing was harmonious seeing things from a mutually beneficial perspective. A reconciliation of divergence and convergence, which we'll talk about in a moment. Endorphins, which relieve pain and induce pleasure, are also released. This is also another reason why I recommend flow and being in your flow, as it's therapeutic. For example, individual experiences physical pain, might notice that they don't experience that physical pain anymore while they're in flow. Athletes who I work with report this to me. They may be going through some kind of physical pain or discomfort in the body. They get into the flow in the performance, and there's no pain. And what's interesting is after the game, the pain doesn't come back as they continue to maintain their flow. So there are different degrees of flow and different kinds of flow. There's more of a mellow flow. There's being deep in the zone. Yet, we know when we're in flow because we can feel it. We think clearly, as applicable, emotionally relate to experiences ideally, and also physically. Life feels like a dance with the experience. Again, could be physical dance with another person. Could also be dance with the musical instrument. Could also be dance with nature. Speaking about music and nature, Johannes Brahms, famous composer, once said that when he arrived in Austria and he was walking through the mountains, he felt so one with nature that he did not want to step on the melodies. What he was indicating was he was in sync with nature. Physical, mental, emotional, spiritual congruence, as mentioned. Shakti is an observation, and Shiva is the observer. Yet, they are not separate. Because in Tantric cosmology, the whole universe is perceived as being created, penetrated, and sustained by the two fundamental aspects, which are permanently, truly, in a perfect, indestructible union. The individual might think otherwise, as the individual may be identified with particular beliefs, dichotomous-based beliefs, that they think one way is better than the other, or it has to be this way or that way, creating unnecessary confusion, resistance. As we discussed, the reconciliation of this is the great secret of life, the truth that sets you free. And that is to dwell in, with, and from the divine center that I am. Know that I and the Father are one. And then acknowledge Mark 14:36, nevertheless, not what I will, but what thou wilt. Which means true self-acceptance, true forms of creative expression, one with experience, authentically living from the premise of truth, knowing that I am fulfilled, as we said, from the divine center, remain in the state of fulfillment. You are fulfilled. You exist beyond the appearances, and thus perpetually and eternally are fulfilled. The individual may be thinking that they are not fulfilled because they formed an identity around appearances, conditions, in which they think if this external condition is met, then they can be fulfilled. If the external condition is not met, then they cannot feel fulfilled. That's an illusion. The individual is identified with illusions, rather than acknowledging that I am fulfilled. So, serotonin, which can be experienced after a flow state, creates this afterglow effect. As mentioned, individuals might be experiencing pain, confusion, stress, yet after experiencing their flow experience, whatever that may be, their initiatives, creative expression, they feel this afterglow. At the end of flow, serotonin fills the brain, producing an afterglow effect. This leaves you feeling the bliss and is felt when an individual is no longer appearing to be in that flow state, yet there's some degree of flow during rejuvenation. And again, all of this happens automatically in a harmonious ratio. That is mentioned, Ananda mind, which was named after the Sanskrit word Ananda, which means bliss, is also released in flow state, which elevates your mood, relieves pain, and it has also been proven to amplify lateral thinking, which I refer to as harmonious being, or we could say lateral being, the ability to link disparate ideas together, releasing identification to beliefs that are dichotomous. For example, divergence and convergence. Divergence is creative and spontaneity, free-flowing thoughts without immediate restrictions and judgments, free-flowing ideas, generating many ideas, open-ended exploration, encouraging a broad range of solutions for a challenge that the individual might be experiencing. And associative play, for example, making connections with seemingly unrelated concepts or ideas. Individuals who remain in their flow are able to see what are seemingly unrelated concepts and ideas and relate them together in a way that makes so much sense and is practical as they infuse it in the creative expression. If the individual does not think for themselves, they may look around to see what others are thinking and form conclusions based on what others are thinking, which, as we've been discussing, past imaginal activity playing out, past beliefs playing out. The individual has the opportunity to go within and discover, we could say, new ideas, or form, by connecting various concepts and ideas together inwardly, associative play. While they're in their flow, this happens automatically, and link them together to come up with creative solutions. For example, one of the things we do in consulting is we go into businesses and we look at their sales, their marketing, their operations, their leadership, their innovation. And while we're in our flow, we're able to see the opportunities in which the business owners might see it from a very rigid, dogmatic, one-sided absolute perspective, where they may say, we tried this one thing and it doesn't work. That means the business is not going to grow or succeed. Or we've done things these 5 ways that we read in books or we learned somewhere, and these are the only ways and it doesn't work. Dichotomous thinking doesn't work. Based on what? Based on a limited scope of options. So no shame and condemnation. We be still in the moment. All we do as consultants is we enter into the flow, remain in the flow, and we engage in a conversation. Let us explore together. And we come up with creative solutions that may have never been discovered before, or at least not perhaps articulated in a book or a video. Divergence, there's benefit to it, as well as convergence, analytical thinking. Looking at applying logic and coming up with steps to a solution. Certainly, we have many well-established solutions for particular challenges. Yet, as mentioned, the particular challenge, which we can see as an opportunity, for it is an opportunity, if identified with particular logical solutions as the only way to bringing forth a resolution, we can in that moment release that identification, be still and know that I am. And sure enough, while in our flow, an idea arises, a new way of thinking, or perhaps ways of thinking that are a combination of different ideas. A combination. For example, I remember one time there was a client who created this software that they were using within the company. And the software helped them manage the internal processes. They had a business providing IT solutions. And they were having challenges growing their business, providing these IT solutions. And I said, you guys developed this wonderful software that you use in-house. It's very beneficial. I trust that there are a number of solution providers out there that can benefit from this particular software. And so what ended up happening was they ended up offering that software as part of their offers, and it generated a new source of revenue for them. Because they were so set on doing business in that particular way where they only offered services within the scope of what they have learned based on solving challenges, seeing the challenges as opportunities for clients, and then providing solutions. Yet they were not aware that they had a solution within their organization that could be offered. And so we diverged a bit. We went outside of a rigid way of looking at things. Now, both of these are valuable. Anandamide, when released, is known to facilitate the lateral thinking, the lateral being, or as I refer to it as harmonious being. A harmonious ratio of divergence and convergence. Creativity, spontaneity, as well as analytical thinking, decision-making, and it's all done in a fun, flow-based way. So let's talk about how we can do this. How does one develop this ability? Well, I recommend watching my flow-based live series. I'll link in the description. We get into a lot of nuances in relation to flow state. In 2017, I was in Playa del Carmen, Mexico. I shared the story before. Here's a high level. I was in Playa del Carmen, Mexico, and I asked myself, when was I the most joyous, fun, coming up with creative solutions to seeming challenges? When I was, let's say, experiencing life in a way that I would say is from the divine center and abiding in the state of fulfillment, knowing that while you're in bliss, experientially living from bliss, as I rest assured knowing I am bliss and living experientially from the premise, physically, emotionally, mentally. This was when I was in flow state. So I committed to it. I made flow a priority. So let's talk about how the individual may relax into the flow. Here's a way that was articulated in the book Flow by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. I recommend reading it. It was very helpful for me. It was actually where I discovered the word flow, and I applied it and practiced it, yet I wasn't doing it as, we could say, of a high priority until I realized that it was actually while I was in flow, where everything was happening ideally automatically, and I was having wonderful conversations, wonderful business opportunities showing up, wonderful experiences, and also business started to grow. All the results started to multiply as I remained in my flow in ways that we can call magical ways, because all kinds of interesting things would happen on their own. Fascinating. I relate this to, again, Mark 14:36. Nevertheless, not what I will, but what thou wilt. So, number one, a clear vision, both abstract and granular. It could be any vision. Put together a business. It could be ideal harmonious relationship. As mentioned, it could be cultivating a skill. It could be a creative expression, visual arts, music, literature, dance, theater, performing arts, conversations, culinary arts, whatever it is, your vision. I would like to make the best whatever dish. For example, I know someone that experiences a lot of flow and is finding it very therapeutic to cook the same dish, just optimize it more and more so. Reminds me of the movie Jiro Dreams of Sushi. So I recommend and I teach all of this from a state of flow, joy, bliss, fun, ease, flow. It can be done. An individual may get to a destination in a stress or space way, or they can get to the destination in a fun, joyous, blissful, flow-based way, which is what's being encouraged to. So a vision, and it can include some granular components as well. For example, take a business. You could chunk it down into a number of projects. Put up a website, source the product, arrange for the logistics of delivery, payment processing, etc. And these are steps, one step at a time, one task at a time. If you find it to be helpful, you could block off the time and do 25 minutes of focused attention, 5-minute break. 25 minutes of focused attention, 5-minute break. 25 minutes of focused attention, 5-minute break. 25 minutes of focused attention, and then a 20-minute break, or something like that. That was very helpful for me in the earlier stages. What this allows you to do is practice. Practice allowing your attention to remain on what is related to your vision. And mind is purified from the drifting-based beliefs that result in attention going in directions that reveal what the individual has been identified with, which is drifting-based beliefs, as Napoleon Hill called it, outwitting the devil, drifting. The individual doesn't think for themselves. He says, I best can define a drifter as someone who doesn't think for themselves. Well, you're definitely thinking for yourself when you remain committed to your vision and remain in your flow so that you can creatively express what you truly desire to express. True self-expression. Immediate reporting and feedback during the initiative. You can take some notes as to what to optimize. Stay committed to the initiative from a state of flow till completion. Do it again and again and again and again. That's all I do. Number 3, a harmony between challenge and skill. If challenge arises, no shame, no condemnation. Release the emotions. Be still. Proceed with the initiative. If applicable, chunk it down into smaller steps. One step at a time, one step at a time. And skill is cultivated. And you remain in your flow. And while you're in your flow, as mentioned, an ideal ratio of divergent and convergent thinking, harmonious being. You'll notice this. Creative ideas, insights, perspectives arise and may be in that moment integrated into your creative expression. Or you may take some notes, integrated in an upcoming performance. Yet you realize that you're enjoying the experience. And you're experiencing the neurotransmitter releases in a harmonious ratio. And you notice that this is experienced as one with the experience. Shiva Shakti. Shiva again, pure observation in relation to appearances. And by that I mean no shame, no condemnation, no judgment, no bias that are a result of the individual forming an identity around appearances as the individual transcends those appearances, operating from the divine center, true identity, awareness being pure in observation, still in relation to appearances. And as mentioned, Shiva Shakti experienced as one Shakti, pure, becoming in flow and creatively as well, expressing into form your creative expression. So challenge is embraced. Challenge is not run away from. It's not ignored. Spiritual integration, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. Allow the emotions to be, allow the thoughts to be, if they are revealing a belief identified with, which we've been referring to as untrue belief. Untrue belief, not from the premise of truth. Truth being love, happiness, peace, bliss, fulfillment. Be still, release, and proceed with the initiative. Whatever it may be, your form of creative expression. You know what you truly desire to express. I mentioned in Sunday's video, all I truly desire is to be as I am, knowing that I am love, happiness, peace, bliss, fulfillment. What does love, happiness, peace, bliss, fulfillment mean to you? Can you imagine what it implies? I am that. And if the individual is, for whatever the reason, unable to visualize what implies, capture the feeling, go all the way to the end. I am bliss. I am ecstasy. Again, as we discussed in Sunday's video, I'll link the description to it. Now, as a person is in the flow with the experience, again, this can be done with athletic performance, surfing, snowboarding, conversations, anything. I can do this and experience it while working on a spreadsheet. I certainly experience it through these conversations. I get to have these conversations, which is why I look forward to having these conversations every week. 3 conversations a week that I put out on this channel. I get to do it. I look forward to it. As I'm following the same way with you. That's why this very simple outline that Mihai Csikszentmihalyi provided in his book Flow is powerful to apply everything we're talking about practically. As mentioned, what could be looked at as confusing to the mind in Tantric cosmology, the whole universe is perceived as being created, penetrated, and sustained by 2 fundamental aspects which are permanently in a perfect, indestructible union. The individual identified with dichotomous beliefs may think it needs to be one way or another. How can it be purely one? It's experienced in the moment while you're in flow. And so, living this way with the current initiative, you choose your initiative, whatever it may be. Then we experience actions and awareness become one. Distractions are excluded. Mind is purified. Mind is purified by remaining committed to your chosen initiatives. And you accomplish your vision and you enjoy the experience, and you cultivate the skill, all in one. Distractions are excluded from the experience, and mind is purified from the untrue beliefs in relation to fear, in relation to doubt, in relation to indecision. Mind is purified while you're in flow. I mentioned this many times. Entrepreneurship has been my spiritual catalyst. The spiritual journey for me started with Think and Grow Rich. Committed to the definite chief fame, actualized it. First definite chief fame, get out of $50,000 debt. Mind was purified on the journey to actualizing that vision. Then the next definite chief aim I committed to, desires from the heart. As mentioned, only God gives and fulfills desires. For I am fulfilled. Knowing that I am fulfilled, the individual experiences individual forms of fulfillment. You name it. Your choice. You know what it is. Go within. And so, what happens? Mind is purified. Fear, doubt, indecision-based beliefs, all by being in flow in relation to experiences. It's joyous, it's fun, it's blissful. I get to do this. Again, again, and again. Individual may even experience time distortion. Minutes may seem like hours, hours may seem like minutes, and including transcendent kind of experiences to what the individual logically relates to time. For example, I notice while I'm in my flow, projects seem to move. Projects seem to move in the backgrounds. There were deals that were appearing to not move in business, relationships, etc. They weren't appearing to move, yet all I did was remain in my flow, and now all of a sudden, they're reaching out to me. Steps are taken. I'm finished my creative initiative. I look at my email, and sure enough, things are moving. Remain in the flow. Time distortion. And the activity and the person becomes autotelic. Autotelic, one with the experience. And part of being autotelic is the individual actually remains unconditional and is not conditioned by appearances. Does not form an identity around appearances, which then if the individual does not experience those conditions, then they believe that they're not bliss, or they point to some illusion that they are not bliss, that they are not happiness, that they're not peace, that they're not fulfilled. It's an untrue belief. Being as I am, the individual is a living example of Romans 12:2. Not conforming to the patterns of this world, for I realize that I am beyond conformity, but is transformed magically into who they genuinely desire to be, and as a form of this truth and as an expression. We can call this the alchemical great work. True self-acceptance through exactly what we're talking about here. It's a simple way of life. Simply I am. Purely I am. Again, referred to in Sunday's video. I'll link in the description to it. And you can thus enjoy a wonderful flow-based journey to actualizing your visions. Actualize your heart desires. And mind is purified on the journey to actualizing the heart desires. As mentioned, spiritual integration, physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. So I trust you found this video to be helpful. Let's conclude this with an auto-suggestion to further encourage. You could say, I dwell within, from the divine center, remaining in my authentic state of fulfillment, relating ideally to the experiences on the journey to actualizing my vision. As I remain in my flow, everything happens automatically and ideally automatically to reveal my heaven on earth as various forms of true self-expression, and in increasing frequency on a continuous basis as far as the senses perceive. If you would like a copy of this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk with you soon. Take care.